It was a calm and quiet evening in New York City. The sun had set, leaving behind a soft glow that lit up the streets of Manhattan. Central Park, with its tall trees and winding paths, seemed almost magical under the dim light of the street lamps. People strolled along the sidewalks, some walking their dogs, others sitting on benches chatting or simply enjoying the cool night air. It was one of those rare moments when the city felt peaceful, almost like it was taking a deep breath after a long day. Melania Trump walked slowly along one of the park's quieter paths. She had decided to take this walk alone, something she rarely did. For years, her life had been filled with public appearances, media attention, and the constant pressure of being in the spotlight. Tonight, however, she wanted nothing more than to escape all of that, even if just for an hour. Dressed in a simple pair of jeans, sneakers, and a light jacket, she blended in perfectly with the crowd. No one gave her a second glance. To anyone passing by, she was just another person enjoying a quiet evening in the park. The sound of leaves rustling in the wind and distant laughter from a group of teenagers made the atmosphere feel almost dreamlike. Melania tucked a strand of her blonde hair behind her ear and pulled her jacket closer around herself as a gentle breeze swept through the park. She smiled faintly, feeling a sense of calm she hadn't felt in a long time. This was exactly what she needed, a moment away from everything. But as she turned onto a less crowded path near the edge of the park, the mood shifted abruptly. Two police officers approached her, their uniforms crisp and their expressions stern. At first, Melania didn't think much of it. Police officers were a common sight in Central Park, especially at night. But something about the way they looked at her made her pause. Their eyes scanned her up and down, lingering on her face, her clothes, the way she carried herself. There was an intensity in their gaze that felt unsettling. "Ma'am," one of them said, his voice sharp and commanding. "Can we see some ID?" Melania blinked, caught off guard by the request. "Of course," she replied politely, reaching into her pocket for her wallet. As she handed over her identification, she noticed the other officer whispering something to his partner. His tone was low, but she could still hear fragments of what he said, words like accent and suspicious. Her stomach tightened. Suspicious? What could possibly be suspicious about her? The first officer studied her ID carefully, his brow furrowed. "You're not from here, are you?" he asked, his tone now colder than before. "I live in New York," Melania answered calmly, though her pulse quickened. "I'm just out for a walk." The second officer stepped closer, his posture aggressive. "Where are you really from?" he demanded, his voice rising slightly. "What are you doing in this neighborhood?" Melania frowned, confusion mixing with irritation. "I told you, I live here. I'm just taking a walk." But the officers weren't satisfied. They exchanged another glance, and then the first one spoke again. "We've had reports of suspicious activity around here lately. You fit the description." "What description?" Melania asked, her voice trembling slightly. She tried to remain composed, but the situation was escalating quickly. "I haven't done anything wrong." The officers ignored her protests. Instead, they moved closer, their body language becoming more threatening. One of them grabbed her arm roughly and spun her around, pressing her against the hood of their patrol car. Melania gasped, pain shooting through her shoulder as her cheek pressed against the cold metal. "Stop!" she cried out, struggling to pull away. "Let me go!" Her cries drew the attention of a few passers-by, who stopped to watch the scene unfold. Some whispered among themselves while others pulled out their phones to record the incident. Melania's heart raced as she realized how dangerous the situation had become. Why were they treating her like this? What had she done to deserve such hostility? The officers continued to bark questions at her, their voices harsh and accusing. "Why are you lying to us?" one of them growled. "Who sent you here?" "I'm not lying," Melania shouted back, tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm telling you the truth, let me go." But they didn't listen. If anything, their aggression only grew worse. One of them twisted her arm further behind her back, causing her to cry out in pain. The other began searching her pockets, dumping the contents onto the ground. Her phone clattered against the pavement, followed by her keys and a small pack of tissues. Humiliation washed over her as she realized the absurdity of the situation. How could this be happening? She was a former First Lady, someone who had spent years representing her country on the world stage. Yet here she was, being treated like a criminal. As the minutes dragged on, the crowd of onlookers grew larger. Some people shouted at the officers to stop, calling them names and demanding answers. Others filmed the entire ordeal, their phones capturing every painful moment. Melania could hear snippets of their conversations, words like racist, abuse, and this isn't right. Despite the chaos surrounding her, she felt completely alone, trapped in a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. Back at Trump Tower, Barron Trump sat in his room, scrolling absent-mindedly through social media. He wasn't expecting anything unusual tonight. His mother had gone out for a walk, something she occasionally did when she needed space to clear her head. Barron respected her need for privacy and had given her plenty of it. So when his phone buzzed with a notification, he barely glanced, at it at first. But then another notification popped up and another, until his screen was flooded with alerts. Curious, he opened one of the posts and froze. A grainy video showed two police officers pinning someone against a car. The person's face was partially obscured, but Barron recognized the blonde hair immediately. It was his mother. His hands trembled as he scrolled through more posts, reading eyewitness accounts and comments from strangers speculating about what had happened. Each new detail hit him like a punch to the gut. Racism, assault, unprovoked attack. These weren't just words. They described something unimaginable, something that had actually happened to his mother. Barron's mind raced as he tried to process what he was seeing. He wanted to call her, to make sure she was okay, but fear paralyzed him. What if she didn't answer? What if something even worse had happened? For a moment, he considered calling his father, but the thought of dealing with his reaction made him hesitate. No, he needed to handle this himself. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the elevator, his heart pounding in his chest. As the door slid shut behind him, Barron clenched his fists tightly, trying to steady his breathing. Whatever had happened, he knew one thing for certain. He wouldn't let this go unanswered. Not for his mother. Not for anyone. By the time morning arrived, the incident in Central Park had exploded into a national conversation. News outlets across the country scrambled to cover the story, each one trying to outdo the others with sensational headlines. Social media platforms were flooded with posts, videos, and heated debates. The video of Melania being detained by the officers had gone viral overnight, viewed millions of times by people from all walks of life. Some watched in shock, unable to believe what they were seeing, while others expressed anger, sadness, or disbelief. The footage wasn't perfect. It was shaky, grainy, and taken from a distance, but it captured enough to tell the story. Viewers could see the two officers grabbing Melania, pushing her against the patrol car and shouting at her. They could hear her cries of pain and protest as she tried to explain herself, and they could feel the tension in the air as bystanders argued with the officers, pleading for them to stop. For many, the video was hard to watch. It painted a picture of injustice so raw and vivid that it left an indelible mark on anyone who saw it. As the day wore on, protests began to form outside police headquarters in New York City. Hundreds of people gathered, holding signs that read, "Justice for Melania and End Police Brutality." Some chanted slogans, their voices echoing through the streets, while others stood silently, their faces grim with determination. The crowd was diverse, men and women, young and old, people of different races and backgrounds, all united by a shared sense of outrage. Among the protesters was a woman named Lisa Carter. She had seen the video early that morning and immediately felt compelled to act. "It's not just about Melania," Lisa said to a reporter covering the event. "This happens every day to people who don't have a platform, who don't have a voice. We're here because we want change." Not everyone agreed with the protesters, though. Online forums and news comment sections were filled with arguments. Some defended the officers, claiming they were just doing their job, and suggesting that Melania must have done something to provoke them. Others dismissed the incident entirely, accusing the media of exaggerating the situation for clicks. "She's rich and famous," one commenter wrote. "Why would they target her? This is ridiculous." But for every doubter, there were dozens more who stood firmly on the side of justice, demanding accountability for what had happened. Meanwhile, back at Trump Tower, Melania remained secluded, choosing to stay out of the public eye as she processed the events of the previous night. Friends close to her described her as shaken but resolute. She didn't want to make any official statements yet, fearing that speaking too soon might inflame the situation further. Instead, she spent much of her time alone, reflecting on what had happened and trying to come to terms with the emotions swirling inside her. Barron, on the other hand, couldn't sit still. After seeing the video and learning the full extent of what his mother had endured, he felt a mix of anger, guilt, and helplessness. He replayed the footage over and over in his mind, each time feeling the same surge of frustration. How could this happen in broad daylight, in one of the most famous cities in the world? Why did no one step in to stop it sooner? And most importantly, why hadn't he been there to protect her? He knew he couldn't let this slide. This wasn't just about his mother anymore. It was bigger than that. It was about standing up for what was right, even if it meant stepping into the spotlight. Barron had always preferred staying out of the public eye, avoiding the scrutiny that came with being part of the Trump family. But this was different. This was personal. Determined to take action, Barron reached out to two people he trusted more than anyone else: Alex Rivera and Maya Johnson. Alex was a tech-savvy college student who had a knack for uncovering hidden truths online. He had helped Barron before with smaller projects, using his skills to dig up information that others might miss. Maya, on the other hand, was a passionate activist who had spent years fighting against systemic racism and advocating for victims of police brutality. Together, the three of them formed an unlikely team, united by a common goal. When Barron explained what had happened to his mother and shared the idea forming in his mind, both Alex and Maya were quick to offer their support. "We can't let this go unanswered," Maya said firmly. "This is our chance to shine a light on something that's been happening for far too long." Alex nodded in agreement. "I'll start digging into those officers' backgrounds," he said. "If there's dirt, I'll find it." Over the next few days, the trio worked tirelessly, each contributing their unique strengths to the effort. Alex spent hours poring over police records, court documents, and social media profiles, searching for any evidence of misconduct or bias. What he found was alarming. Both officers had been involved in multiple complaints over the years, ranging from excessive force to racial profiling. While none of the cases had resulted in serious consequences for the officers, the patterns were clear and damning. Maya, meanwhile, focused on rallying support. She organized protests, contacted influential activists, and used her network to spread awareness about the case. Her energy was infectious, inspiring others to join the cause. Within days, the movement gained momentum, drawing attention from politicians, celebrities, and everyday citizens alike. As the pieces began to fall into place, Barron started drafting a plan. He knew he needed to address the issue head-on, but he also wanted to do it in a way that would resonate with people. After much thought, he decided on a press conference, a bold move that would put him directly in the spotlight. It wasn't something he took lightly, but he believed it was necessary. On the morning of the announcement, Barron called his mother into his room. He wanted to make sure she was okay with what he was planning to do. "Mom," he said gently, "I need to talk to you about something." Melania looked up from the book she had been reading, her expression wary. "What is it?" she asked. "I'm going to hold a press conference," Barron explained. "I'm going to tell everyone what happened to you and show them the truth about those officers. I won't let this go unanswered." For a moment, Melania was silent. Then she nodded slowly, a faint smile crossing her face. "Do what you think is right," she said softly. "But be careful, Barron. People will say things they always do." Barron swallowed hard, knowing she was right. He had seen how cruel the internet could be, how quickly opinions could spiral out of control. But he also knew that staying silent wouldn't solve anything. If anything, it would only make the problem worse. With his mother's blessing, Barron finalized the details of the press conference. He chose a location just outside Trump Tower, where reporters could gather easily. Alex and Maya promised to stand by his side, offering moral support and helping to answer questions if needed. As the day approached, Barron rehearsed his speech over and over, making sure every word was clear and deliberate. Despite his preparation, nerves still gnawed at him. What if he froze up during the conference? What if people didn't listen? What if the backlash became too much to handle? These thoughts swirled in his mind as he lay awake the night before, staring at the ceiling. But when morning finally came, Barron pushed aside his doubts and focused on the task ahead. He dressed carefully, choosing a simple outfit that conveyed seriousness without being overly formal. As he stepped outside, cameras flashing and reporters shouting questions, he reminded himself of why he was doing this. This wasn't about fame or politics, it was about justice. And nothing, not fear, not criticism, not even the weight of his family name, would stop him from fighting. The morning of the press conference was tense. Barron woke up early, his mind racing with thoughts about what was to come. He had spent days preparing for this moment, rehearsing his speech and working closely with Alex and Maya to ensure everything would go smoothly. But no amount of preparation could fully calm his nerves. This wasn't just another event. It was a defining moment, one that could change how people viewed not only his family, but also the larger issues at play. As he stood in front of the mirror adjusting his tie for the 100th time, Barron thought about his mother. Melania had been supportive, encouraging him to do what he believed was right, but he knew she was still recovering from the trauma of that night. The image of her being pushed against the patrol car replayed in his mind like a broken record. It fueled his determination, reminding him why he couldn't back down now. If he stayed silent, it would send the wrong message, that powerful people were above accountability, or worse, that victims should simply move on without seeking justice. By mid-morning, the area outside Trump Tower was packed. Reporters from every major news outlet had gathered, their cameras and microphones set up in neat rows facing the makeshift stage. Protesters holding signs lined the sidewalks nearby, chanting slogans like, "Justice for all and no more racism." Supporters and critics alike filled the streets, creating an electric atmosphere charged with anticipation. Barron watched the scene unfold from a window inside the building, feeling both overwhelmed and determined. Alex and Maya arrived shortly before the conference was scheduled to begin. They found Barron pacing nervously in a small room set aside for last-minute preparations. "You've got this," Alex said confidently, placing a hand on Barron's shoulder. "We've done everything we can. Now it's your turn to speak." Maya nodded in agreement. "Just remember why you're doing this," she added. "It's not about you, it's about making sure something like this never happens again." Barron took a deep breath, nodding slowly. He knew they were right. This wasn't about personal glory. It was about standing up for what was fair and just. With one final glance at himself in the mirror, he straightened his posture and walked toward the door. When Barron stepped onto the stage, the noise level surged. Cameras clicked rapidly, capturing every movement while reporters shouted questions, their voices overlapping in a chaotic symphony. Barron raised a hand to signal for quiet, waiting patiently until the crowd settled down. When the noise finally subsided, he began to speak. "Thank you all for coming today," he started, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside him. "What I'm about to share is difficult, not just for me, but for my family and everyone who believes in fairness and equality." He paused, looking out at the sea of faces before continuing. "Last night, my mother, Melania Trump, was assaulted by 2 police officers in Central Park. She was targeted because of her accent, treated as if she didn't belong here, and humiliated in front of strangers, all for taking a simple walk." The crowd erupted into murmurs, some gasping audibly at the details. Barron waited for the reaction to die down before continuing. "This isn't just about my mother. It's about the countless others who have faced similar treatment but haven't had a platform to speak out. It's about the systemic racism and abuse of power that continue to plague our society. And it's about holding those responsible accountable for their actions. He gestured to Alex, who stepped forward with a laptop in hand. On the screen, behind Barron, a video began to play. It showed clips of the incident from multiple angles pieced together from footage captured by bystanders. The images were jarring. Melania being shoved against the car, her face contorted in pain and fear, the officers shouting accusations at her. The video cut to statements from witnesses, many of whom described the officers' behavior as aggressive and racially motivated. But the most shocking part came next. Alex had compiled evidence of the officers' past misconduct, including internal complaints filed by other victims. One woman recounted being detained without cause during a traffic stop, while a man described being beaten during an arrest for a minor offense. Each story painted a disturbing picture of repeated patterns of abuse, none of which had resulted in serious consequences for the officers involved. When the video ended, the crowd fell silent. Barron stepped forward again, his expression resolute. These officers didn't see my mother as a person. They saw her as someone foreign, someone lesser. That's not just racism, it's dehumanization, and we can't let it stand. His words struck a chord with the audience. Some people applauded, while others wiped away tears. Reporters scribbled furiously in their notebooks, eager to capture every detail of his statement. Barron continued, outlining the steps he planned to take moving forward. He announced the creation of a foundation aimed at combating systemic racism and supporting victims of police brutality. Maya would serve as its director, leveraging her experience as an activist, while Alex would oversee cybersecurity efforts to protect the organization from potential threats. We need accountability, Barron emphasized, his voice rising slightly. We need transparency, and most importantly, we need change. This isn't about politics or fame, it's about humanity. No one should be treated the way my mother was treated that night. As he wrapped up his speech, Barron opened the floor to questions. Reporters immediately jumped at the opportunity, firing off inquiries about everything from the legal proceedings against the officers to Barron's personal feelings about stepping into the spotlight. He answered each question thoughtfully, maintaining his composure even when the questions turned critical. One reporter asked, "Do you think this incident will affect your family's public image?" Barron hesitated for a moment before responding. "I don't care about our public image," he said firmly. "This is about doing what's right. My family has always been in the spotlight, but this isn't about us. It's about making sure no one else has to go through what my mother went through." Another reporter pressed him on whether he regretted speaking out so publicly. Barron paused, considering the question carefully. "Regret? No," he replied. "Fear, maybe. But staying silent would have been worse. Silence doesn't fix anything." The press conference lasted nearly an hour, but when it finally ended, Barron felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time since hearing about the incident, he felt like he was taking control of the situation, instead of letting it control him. As he stepped off the stage, Alex and Maya greeted him with wide smiles. "You did great," Maya said, giving him a quick hug. "People are going to listen because of what you said today." Alex nodded in agreement. "Yeah, and thanks to the evidence we uncovered, those officers won't be able to hide anymore." Despite the positive feedback, Barron knew the fight was far from over. The road ahead would be long and difficult, filled with challenges and resistance, but for the first time in a long time he felt hopeful, not just for his family but for the possibility of real change. That evening, as Barron sat with his mother in their apartment, Melania reached out and placed a hand on his arm. "I'm proud of you," she said softly, her voice tinged with emotion. "What you did today, it means a lot." Barron smiled faintly, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. For so long, he had avoided the spotlight, preferring to stay in the background. But now he realized that sometimes stepping forward was the only way to make a difference. And though the journey ahead would be tough, he knew he wasn't alone. Together with Alex, Maya, and countless others who shared their vision, They were ready to fight for a better future, one where no one had to endure the kind of injustice his mother had faced. In the days following the press conference, the world seemed to hold its breath. Barron's speech had struck a nerve, sparking conversations in homes, workplaces, and communities across the country. People debated the incident, dissecting every detail of Melania's treatment and the evidence presented by Alex. Social media was flooded with hashtags like #Justice for Melania and #Accountability Now, while news outlets continued to cover the story around the clock. The momentum Barron, Alex, and Maya had built showed no signs of slowing down. But with attention came backlash. Not everyone supported Barron's decision to speak out. Critics accused him of using his mother's ordeal for publicity, claiming he was exploiting the situation to gain favor or restore his family's reputation. Some even suggested that Melania had provoked the officers, pointing to her accent and demeanor as reasons they might have been suspicious. These accusations stung, especially when they came from people Barron had once considered allies. At first, Barron tried to ignore the criticism. He reminded himself of why he was doing this. It wasn't about fame or politics. It was about justice. But as the days passed, the negativity began to wear on him. He found himself reading hateful comments online late at night, unable to look away despite knowing it would only make him feel worse. Alex noticed the change in his friend and decided to step in. "Barron," Alex said one evening as they worked together in a small office space set up for the foundation, "you can't let them get to you. This is exactly what they want, to distract you from the real issue." Barron sighed, rubbing his temples. "I know," he admitted, "but it's hard not to care when they're saying such awful things about my mom and me." Maya chimed in, her voice firm but kind. "They're scared, Barron. You've exposed something they don't want to face. The truth. That's why they're lashing out. Don't give them the satisfaction of letting it affect you." Her words helped, but only a little. Barron still struggled to shake off the weight of the backlash. He knew Maya and Alex were right. This wasn't about him, but it didn't make the criticism any easier to hear. Meanwhile, the two officers involved in the incident faced mounting pressure. Their names became public knowledge, and their faces appeared on news broadcasts and social media posts. Protesters gathered outside their homes, holding signs and chanting slogans demanding accountability. Death threats poured in, forcing both men into hiding. Their families were dragged into the spotlight too, enduring harassment and scrutiny. While some defended the officers, claiming they were being unfairly targeted, the majority of public opinion leaned heavily against them. Behind the scenes, Alex worked tirelessly to ensure the foundation's efforts remained focused and effective. Using his tech skills, he tracked online activity related to the case, monitoring everything from supportive messages to threats against Barron and his family. He also set up secure communication channels for victims of police misconduct to share their stories anonymously. Many of these accounts were heartbreaking, tales of wrongful arrests, excessive force, and systemic racism that echoed Melania's experience. Maya, meanwhile, organized rallies and community meetings to keep the momentum going. She reached out to influential activists, lawyers, and politicians, building a coalition of supporters determined to push for reform. Her fiery speeches inspired crowds, earning her praise as a key figure in the movement. Despite the long hours and constant travel, she never lost sight of the goal, creating lasting change. As weeks turned into months, the legal process against the officers moved forward. Both men were suspended from duty pending an investigation, and charges of misconduct and racial profiling were filed against them. The case drew widespread attention, with experts weighing in on its potential impact on law enforcement practices nationwide. For many, it represented a turning point, a chance to address deep-rooted issues within the system. During this time, Barron made a conscious effort to stay grounded. He spent more time with his mother, checking in on her regularly to ensure she was coping well. Melania had begun seeing a therapist to work through the trauma of the incident, and while she still had moments of anxiety, she seemed to be healing. Her strength inspired Barron, reminding him of the importance of resilience. One afternoon, as Barron sat in the living room of their apartment, his phone buzzed with a notification. It was a message from an unknown number. Curious, he opened it and read the text. "You think you're brave? Wait until you see what happens next." His heart sank. Was this a threat? A warning? He immediately forwarded the message to Alex, who promised to investigate its origin. Alex traced the sender's IP address back to a burner device, making it nearly impossible to identify the person behind the message. Still, he advised Barron to take precautions. "Stay alert," Alex warned, "and don't go anywhere alone if you can help it." The incident rattled Barron, but it also strengthened his resolve. If someone wanted to intimidate him into silence, they were going to fail. He doubled down on his commitment to the cause, pouring even more energy into the foundation and its initiatives. With each passing day, he grew more confident in his ability to lead, not just because of his name, but because of the values he stood for. Despite the challenges, there were moments of hope. Victims of police brutality who had shared their stories through the foundation began receiving support and resources they desperately needed. Lawyers offered pro bono services to help file lawsuits, while mental health professionals provided counseling to those struggling with trauma. Communities came together, hosting events and fundraisers to raise awareness and funds for the cause. One particularly touching moment occurred during a rally in Washington, D.C. A young woman named Sophie Martinez took the stage to share her story. She recounted being stopped by police while walking home from work, accused of fitting the description of a suspect despite having done nothing wrong. Her voice trembled as she described the fear and humiliation she felt, but when she finished speaking, the crowd erupted into applause. Barron stood nearby, listening intently, and felt a surge of pride. Stories like Sophie's were proof that their efforts were making a difference. As the trial date approached, tensions ran high. The officers' defense team argued that they had acted within protocol, dismissing claims of racial bias as unfounded. Prosecutors countered with the overwhelming evidence Alex had uncovered, painting a damning picture of repeated misconduct. Witnesses testified, recounting their own experiences with the officers, while experts analyzed body camera footage and audio recordings. Every detail mattered, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. On the morning of the verdict, Barron woke up early, his stomach churning with nerves. He dressed carefully, choosing a suit that conveyed seriousness without being overly formal. As he stepped outside, cameras flashed, capturing his every move. Reporters shouted questions, but Barron ignored them, focusing instead on the task ahead. He met Alex and Maya near the courthouse, where a large crowd had gathered. Supporters held signs and chanted slogans, while critics jeered from a distance. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense. Barron sat between Alex and Maya, gripping the edge of his seat as the judge delivered the verdict. When the words finally came, "Guilty on all counts," the room erupted into cheers. Tears streamed down Barron's face as he hugged his friends tightly. Justice had been served, but the fight wasn't over yet. That evening, as Barron reflected on the day's events, he realized how much he had grown. Stepping into the spotlight had been terrifying, but it had also taught him the power of standing up for what was right. He thought about his mother, whose courage had inspired him to act, and about all the people who had joined the movement along the way. Together they had achieved something remarkable, but there was still so much work to be done. As he looked toward the future, Barron felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would be challenging, but he was ready. After Barr, all silence wasn't an option anymore. The guilty verdict against the two officers marked a significant victory, but it was far from the end of the story. While many celebrated the outcome, others viewed it as just one small step in a much larger battle. Barron, Alex, and Maya understood this better than anyone. The trial had exposed deep flaws in the system, but fixing those flaws would require sustained effort and unwavering commitment. In the weeks following the verdict, public attention began to shift. News outlets moved on to other stories, and social media chatter slowed down. For some, the case became a distant memory, tucked away in the back of their minds. But for Barron and his team, the work was only beginning. They knew that without continued action, the momentum they had built could fade, leaving behind the same broken system they were trying to change. Barron threw himself into the foundation, working long hours alongside Alex and Maya to expand its reach. They launched educational programs aimed at raising awareness about systemic racism and police misconduct. Schools invited them to speak to students, sharing stories of victims and discussing ways to foster empathy and understanding. Community centers hosted workshops where people learned how to document incidents safely and report abuses effectively. Every initiative was designed to empower individuals and encourage collective action. One of the Foundation's most impactful projects was a hotline for reporting misconduct. Operated by trained volunteers, the hotline allowed callers to share their experiences anonymously. Calls poured in from all over the country, some describing minor infractions, others detailing harrowing encounters with law enforcement. Each call was logged and reviewed, and when appropriate, legal assistance was provided. The hotline quickly became a lifeline for those who felt voiceless, offering hope to people who had nowhere else to turn. Alex played a crucial role in managing the hotline's operations. Using his tech expertise, he developed software to analyze patterns in the reports, identifying areas where misconduct was most prevalent. This data proved invaluable, not only for targeting specific regions, but also for lobbying lawmakers to implement reforms. Alex presented the findings to city councils and state legislatures, urging officials to adopt policies that promoted accountability and transparency within police departments. Maya, meanwhile, focused on grassroots organizing. She traveled across the country, meeting with activists and community leaders to build partnerships. Her passion and determination inspired others to join the cause, creating a network of supporters united by a shared vision of justice. Together, they planned rallies, marches, and town hall meetings, keeping the conversation alive and ensuring that the issue remained a priority. Despite their progress, challenges persisted. Threats against Barron and his family continued, forcing them to take extra precautions. Security guards were hired to monitor Trump Tower, and Barron rarely left home without an escort. Even so, the threats weighed heavily on him. He often found himself looking over his shoulder, wondering if someone might act on their hateful words. Still, he refused to let fear dictate his actions. If anything, the threats reinforced his belief that the fight was worth it. One evening, as Barron sat in his room reviewing documents for the Foundation, his phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. Hesitant but curious, he answered. A man's voice came through the speaker, low and menacing. "You think you're making a difference? You're playing with fire, kid." Barron's heart raced, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Who is this?" he asked, his voice steady despite the knot forming in his stomach. "You'll find out soon enough," the caller replied before hanging up. Shaken, Barron immediately called Alex, who traced the call to another burner device. Frustrated but unsurprised, Alex reminded Barron to remain vigilant. "These people are cowards," Alex said firmly. "They can't win unless we let them scare us into silence." Though unsettling, the incident served as a reminder of the stakes involved. It wasn't just about holding two officers accountable. It was about challenging an entire system that enabled such behavior. And systems didn't give up power easily. Amid the challenges, there were moments of triumph that kept Barron going. One such moment came during a visit to Chicago, where the Foundation had partnered with a local organization to host a community forum. Hundreds of people attended, filling a large auditorium to capacity. Victims of police brutality shared their stories, their voices trembling yet resolute. Lawyers offered free consultations, helping attendees navigate the legal process. Volunteers distributed resources, providing information on everything from filing complaints to accessing mental health services. At the end of the event, a young boy approached Barron clutching a handmade sign that read, "Thank you for standing up." His mother stood nearby, tears streaming down her face. "My son made this for you," she said softly. "We've been fighting for years, but no one ever listened until now." Barron knelt down to the boy's level, taking the sign gently in his hands. "This means so much," he said, his voice thick with emotion. keep believing in yourself, and keep speaking up. Moments like these reminded Barron why he had stepped forward in the first place. Change wasn't easy, and it certainly wasn't quick, but every small victory mattered. Every person helped, every story told, brought them closer to the world they envisioned. A world where everyone was treated with dignity and respect. As the months passed, the foundation gained traction, attracting support from unexpected places. Celebrities used their platforms to amplify the message, while businesses donated funds to sustain the organization's efforts. Politicians, once hesitant to associate themselves with the Trump name, began endorsing the foundation's initiatives, recognizing the importance of the work being done. Even Donald Trump, Barron's father, made a rare public appearance to express his support. In a brief statement, he praised Barron's courage, calling him a true leader, and urging Americans to reflect on the broader issues at play. While some dismissed the gesture as politically motivated, others saw it as a rare moment of unity within the fractured Trump family. For Barron, it was bittersweet. He appreciated the acknowledgement, but knew the real credit belonged to the countless individuals who had worked tirelessly behind the scenes. By the end of the year, the foundation had achieved remarkable success. Lawsuits filed on behalf of victims resulted in settlements and policy changes in several cities. Training programs for law enforcement officers emphasized de-escalation techniques and cultural sensitivity. Public awareness campaigns reached millions, sparking conversations that might not have happened otherwise. Slowly but surely, the tide was turning. Still, Barron remained grounded. He understood that lasting change required patience and persistence. There would be setbacks along the way, moments when progress seemed impossible. But he also knew that giving up wasn't an option. Too many lives depended on the work they were doing. On New Year's Eve, Barron stood on the balcony of Trump Tower gazing out at the city skyline. Fireworks lit up the night sky, casting colorful reflections on the windows below. Alex and Maya joined him, each carrying a cup of hot chocolate. They clinked their cups together, celebrating the year's achievements and looking ahead to the future. To justice, Maya said with a smile. And to never staying silent, Barron added, his voice filled with determination. As the clock struck midnight, marking the start of a new year, Barron felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but he was ready. With Alex, Maya, and countless others by his side, he knew they could continue to make a difference, one step at a time. The new year brought with it a mix of challenges and opportunities. While the foundation continued to grow, Barron, Alex, and Maya faced new obstacles that tested their resolve. The guilty verdict against the two officers had set a precedent, but it also sparked resistance from groups determined to protect the status quo. Some police unions pushed back fiercely, arguing that reforms were unnecessary and claiming that the trial had unfairly targeted law enforcement. Critics accused Barron's foundation of being anti-police, twisting its mission to fit their narrative. Despite the backlash, Barron remained steadfast. He knew the foundation wasn't about attacking police officers as individuals. It was about addressing systemic issues that allowed misconduct to go unchecked. To counter the criticism, he invited retired law enforcement officials who supported reform to speak at events and share their perspectives. These voices added credibility to the movement, showing that change could come from within the system itself. One such speaker was Officer Daniel Harris, a veteran cop who had spent decades serving his community before retiring. During a town hall meeting in Los Angeles, Daniel stood before a packed auditorium and spoke candidly about his experiences. "Not all cops are bad," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "But there are bad apples, and when we don't hold them accountable, it tarnishes the badge for everyone else. We need to do better, for our communities and for ourselves." His words resonated deeply with the audience, earning applause and even tears. Afterward, several attendees approached him to thank him for speaking out. One woman shared how her brother had been wrongfully arrested years earlier, leaving her distrustful of law enforcement ever since. "Hearing you talk gives me hope," she told Daniel. "Maybe things can change after all." Moments like these reminded Barron why they were fighting so hard. Change wouldn't happen overnight, but every conversation, every story shared, brought them closer to their goal. The Foundation's message was spreading, reaching corners of the country where discussions about racism and police accountability had long been avoided. As spring approached, the Foundation launched its most ambitious project yet, a nationwide campaign called Voices for Justice. The initiative aimed to collect testimonies from victims of police misconduct and present them to lawmakers in Washington, D.C. Barron, Alex, and Maya traveled across the country, hosting listening sessions. In cities large and small, they met people from all walks of life: farmers in rural towns, teachers in urban neighborhoods, parents grieving the loss of loved ones, all united by a desire for fairness and respect. In Detroit, a man named Marcus Johnson recounted how officers had broken into his home without a warrant, destroying property and terrifying his children. In Miami, a college student described being stopped repeatedly while driving through predominantly white areas, each encounter more humiliating than the last. In Seattle, an elderly woman tearfully recalled watching her grandson get tackled to the ground during a routine traffic stop, simply because he fit the description of a suspect. Each story was heartbreaking, but together they painted a powerful picture of injustice. Alex recorded every session, compiling the testimonies into a documentary-style video that would accompany the presentation to Congress. Maya coordinated logistics, ensuring that participants felt safe and supported throughout the process. And Barron listened intently, absorbing the weight of each person's pain while offering words of encouragement. By the time they reached Washington, D.C., the team had gathered hundreds of stories. Dozens of activists and supporters joined them for the final leg of the journey, marching through the streets to deliver the testimonies to Capitol Hill. Lawmakers listened as Barron presented the findings, their expressions ranging from shock to sympathy. Some pledged immediate action, promising to introduce legislation aimed at increasing accountability and transparency. Others remained skeptical, questioning whether the proposed reforms went too far or not far enough. Still, the impact was undeniable. For the first time, many legislators heard directly from those affected by police misconduct, humanizing an issue often reduced to statistics and headlines. Barron's closing remarks left a lasting impression. "These aren't just stories, they're lives," he said, his voice firm but compassionate. "And every single one deserves justice." The campaign received widespread media coverage, reigniting public interest in the cause. Celebrities, athletes, and influencers used their platforms to amplify the message, urging followers to contact their representatives and demand change. Donations poured in, allowing the Foundation to expand its reach even further. Volunteers signed up in droves, eager to contribute however they could. Back in New York, Melania watched her son's transformation with pride. The shy, reserved boy she once knew had grown into a confident leader, unafraid to challenge the world around him. She often joined him at events, sharing her own story and encouraging others to speak up. Though still healing from the trauma of that night in Central Park, she found strength in knowing her experience had sparked something meaningful. One evening, as mother and son sat together on the balcony of Trump Tower, Melania placed a hand on Barron's shoulder. "I'm proud of you," she said softly, her eyes glistening with tears. "You've done so much good." Barron smiled faintly, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. "We couldn't have done it without you," he replied. "Your courage inspired everything." Though progress was evident, Barron knew the fight was far from over. Resistance persisted, with some opponents doubling down on their efforts to discredit the Foundation. Online trolls spread misinformation, attempting to paint Barron and his team as extremists. Protesters clashed outside courthouses and city halls, their chants echoing through the streets. Yet amid the chaos, Barron saw glimmers of hope. More and more people were waking up to the reality of systemic racism, refusing to accept it as inevitable. One particularly inspiring moment came. During a rally in Atlanta, a young girl no older than 10 stepped onto the stage, clutching a megaphone almost as big as she was. Her name was Lily, and she had written a poem about justice and equality. As she recited her words, The crowd fell silent, captivated by her innocence and wisdom. "When we stand together," Lily concluded, her voice ringing out clear and strong, "we can make the world fair for everyone." The crowd erupted into cheers, lifting Lily onto their shoulders as they chanted her name. Barron stood nearby, wiping away tears. Moments like these reminded him that the future rested in capable hands, the hands of those brave enough to dream of a better world. Months later, as summer gave way to fall, Barron reflected on how far they had come. The foundation had grown beyond anything he could have imagined, touching countless lives and sparking real change. Reforms had been implemented in several states, requiring body cameras for all officers and mandating independent investigations into misconduct cases. Training programs emphasized empathy and de-escalation, fostering stronger relationships between law enforcement and the communities they served. But perhaps the greatest victory was the shift in mindset. People were talking openly about race, privilege, and power, conversations that had once been taboo. Schools incorporated lessons on social justice into their curriculums, teaching students to recognize inequality and advocate for fairness. Families discussed these topics around dinner tables, challenging biases and stereotypes passed down through generations. For Barron, the journey had changed him in ways he never expected. He had stepped into the spotlight reluctantly, driven by a sense of duty to his mother and to others who had suffered similar injustices. Along the way, he discovered a passion for advocacy, realizing that his voice could be a force for good. Though the road ahead would be long and uncertain, he felt ready to face whatever came next. On a crisp autumn morning, Barron, Alex, and Maya gathered in Central Park, the same place where Melania's ordeal had begun. They walked along the paths lined with golden leaves, reflecting on everything they had accomplished. The park was alive with activity, children laughing, couples strolling hand in hand, and joggers weaving through the trails. It was a scene of peace and harmony, a stark contrast to the tension that had gripped it months earlier. As they reached the spot where the incident had occurred, Barron paused, looking around at the familiar surroundings. "It feels different now," he said, his voice thoughtful. "Like maybe something good came out of something terrible." Maya nodded, smiling warmly. "That's how change works. Pain opens doors we didn't know existed." Alex grinned, patting Barron on the back. "And you kicked those doors wide open." They stood there for a moment, taking it all in. Then, with renewed energy, they turned and walked away, ready to continue the fight. The battle for justice was far from over, but they carried with them the knowledge that silence was no longer an option, and that together they could create a brighter, fairer future.